Think about what happens on a modern warship. When an unidentified vessel appears beyond the horizon, the crew may never see it with their own eyes. Radar detects a return. Computers estimate its course and speed. Electronic sensors analyze its transmissions. Aircraft, satellites, and other ships may provide additional information. The contact appears on a digital display long before a lookout can identify a silhouette. Now remove all of it. No radar, no infrared camera, no electronic screen showing every ship in the surrounding sea. During the First World War, a battleship could carry guns capable of striking targets many miles away. Yet after sunset, it might be unable to identify another vessel until that ship was close enough to launch torpedoes. The ocean became an empty black surface. A lookout stared into the darkness, trying to decide whether a faint shape was smoke, cloud, land, or the silhouette of an enemy ship. A flash appeared on the horizon. Was it lightning, a searchlight, a gun firing, a burning vessel? Was it 10 miles away or 2? And perhaps the most dangerous question of all, was it the enemy? Warships still had to patrol, escort convoys, enforce blockades, search for submarines, approach hostile coastlines, and sometimes fight entire fleets after daylight disappeared. So how did navies find the enemy at night before radar? The answer takes us into a world of human lookouts, scouting cruisers, intercepted wireless messages, optical instruments, recognition signals, searchlights, star shells, gun flashes, torpedo attacks, burning ships, and captains making life or death decisions based on a shadow visible for only a few seconds. But the deeper answer is more unsettling. Most of the time, they did not truly find the enemy at night in the modern sense. They predicted where he might be. They placed ships along the routes he was likely to use. They listened for wireless transmissions. They watched for smoke, sparks, lights, wakes, and gun flashes. They sent cruisers and destroyers ahead like moving eyes. And when contact finally came, it was often sudden, confused, and far closer than anyone wanted. Before radar, night did not simply make naval warfare more difficult, it changed the nature of the battle. In daylight, fleets could observe, identify, maneuver against, and fire upon one another across long distances. At night, those enormous formations became groups of isolated ships moving through darkness, each possessing only a fragment of the truth. The same darkness that concealed the enemy also concealed friendly vessels. A captain could find the opposing fleet and still hesitate to fire because he could not be certain whose ships were in front of him. And in that hesitation, the enemy might fire first. To understand how this system worked, we need to begin with the oldest detection technology ever carried aboard a warship, the human eye. For thousands of years, finding another vessel at sea depended on someone seeing it. Lookouts were positioned where they had the widest possible view, often high above the deck on masts, bridges, fighting tops, and observation platforms. Height mattered because the curvature of the earth limited what could be seen from the waterline. A sailor standing on the deck might see only a short distance. A lookout high on the mast could detect smoke, sails, or upper structures before the hull of the approaching ship appeared. In the age of steam, the first sign of another warship was often not the ship itself. It was smoke. Coal-fired vessels produced dark columns that could be visible beyond the horizon. A lookout might report smoke in a particular direction, and officers would begin trying to determine what it meant. One column might indicate a merchant ship. Several might suggest a squadron. A wide bank of smoke could reveal an entire fleet. But smoke was not a reliable identifier. Wind spread it. Clouds resembled it. Friendly and neutral vessels produced it too. A ship could reduce visible smoke by changing how its boilers were fired, although this might affect speed and efficiency. At night, smoke could disappear into the sky unless moonlight or fire illuminated it. Lookouts, therefore, trained themselves to notice details most people would ignore. A darker patch against the horizon, a brief interruption in the stars, the faint outline of a mast, sparks rising from a funnel, a strip of foam where no wave should be breaking, a dark object moving against the lighter surface of the sea. Their work was exhausting. A lookout did not watch the ocean for a few dramatic minutes. He stared for hours. Wind cut across his face. Spray struck his eyes. Coal smoke drifted through the ship. Cold reduced concentration. The engines vibrated beneath him, and darkness played tricks on human vision. The eye can sometimes detect faint movement more effectively when a person looks slightly to one side rather than directly at the object. Sailors learn to scan the horizon instead of fixing their eyes on one point. But the mind also invents patterns. A wave becomes a periscope. A cloud becomes smoke. A shadow becomes a destroyer. The longer a man expects danger, the easier it becomes to see danger everywhere. False sightings were common. Navies received reports of submarines, mines, ships, and torpedoes that did not exist. The lookouts were not necessarily careless. They saw something unusual and interpreted it through fear, exhaustion, and expectation. The real problem was that the ocean offered very little information. At night, a warship painted in gray could merge with the horizon. Its hull might remain invisible, while only the masts and funnels appeared. A low destroyer or torpedo boat could approach much closer than a battleship before being noticed. Weather made everything worse. Fog reduced visibility to a few hundred yards. Rain erased the horizon. Sea spray covered lenses. Low clouds absorbed light. Moonlight might expose one fleet while leaving the other concealed. A ship silhouetted against a pale horizon could be visible from miles away, while the opponent, looking toward darkness, saw almost nothing. This created what sailors understood as the advantage of light. Every captain wanted the enemy outlined against moonlight, fire, or the brighter sky while his own ship remained hidden. But no admiral controlled the moon. Before battle even began, navies tried to solve the detection problem through scouting. A major battle fleet did not normally move as one compact group waiting to collide with another. Cruisers and lighter ships spread ahead and to the sides. Destroyers screened the battleships. Submarines and patrol vessels watched important routes. These smaller ships extended the fleet's field of vision. They were the eyes of the formation. A scouting cruiser might detect smoke, investigate merchant traffic, intercept an unknown vessel, or encounter the enemy's own scouts. It then reported what it had seen by wireless, flags, or signal lamps. The battleships followed behind, protected from immediate surprise and given time to prepare, but scouting created a chain of dependence. The scout had to find the enemy, it had to identify him correctly, it had to estimate position, course, speed, and strength. It had to transmit the report. The message had to be received and understood. Then the fleet commander had to act before the information became obsolete. Every step could fail. A cruiser might see only part of the enemy force. It could mistake battle cruisers for battleships. The position might be wrong. The enemy could change course immediately after being observed. A wireless message could be delayed, intercepted, or misunderstood. At sea, there were no roads restricting movement. Once lost from sight, a fleet could turn in almost any direction and disappear into an enormous area of water. While finding the enemy was therefore not only a visual problem, it was a mathematical one. Commanders estimated where a fleet could be based on its last known position, course, and speed. If a ship was sighted moving north at 20 knots, officers could calculate where it might be an hour later. But even small uncertainties expanded over time. Perhaps the speed estimate was wrong. Perhaps the report was already 30 minutes old. Perhaps the enemy turned after contact. Soon the expected location was not one point. It was a large section of ocean. This is why naval warfare involved so much waiting and searching. Fleets crossed empty water. Cruisers investigated distant smoke. Destroyers patrolled expected routes. Submarines watched the entrances to naval bases. Most of the time, nothing happened. Then contact came without warning. Wireless communication transformed naval operations before World War I, but not in the way modern radar did. Wireless allowed ships to exchange messages without remaining within visual range. Admiralties could communicate with forces at sea. Scouts could report contacts. Ships separated by miles could coordinate more effectively than earlier fleets. But every transmission created a new form of visibility. A wireless signal could be intercepted. The listener might not understand the encrypted message, but he could learn that a station was active. Direction-finding stations could estimate where transmissions originated. Patterns of traffic revealed movement. If a normally quiet naval base suddenly produced heavy wireless communication, something might be happening. If known enemy call signs began transmitting at sea, a fleet might be preparing for an operation. The contents of the message could remain secret. The existence of the message did not. This gave signals intelligence an increasingly important place in naval warfare. The British Admiralty's Room 40 intercepted and analyzed German communications. Captured codebooks helped British intelligence read parts of the German naval traffic. This did not create perfect knowledge. Codes changed. Call signs could be deceptive. Positions remained uncertain. Information was not always passed to commanders clearly or quickly. But intercepted wireless traffic could indicate that German forces were preparing to sail. That played an important role before the Battle of Jutland in 1916. The British did not discover that the German high seas fleet had left port simply because one lookout happened to see it. They already had indications that a major operation was underway. Both fleets sailed into the North Sea. Scouting forces spread ahead. The problem became converting strategic warning into physical contact. That contact occurred in an almost ordinary way. On the afternoon of May 31st, the British light cruiser HMS Galatea moved to investigate a neutral Danish merchant vessel. German scouting ships were also nearby. Smoke was observed. Reports were transmitted. The opposing battlecruiser forces moved toward one another. One of the largest naval battles in history began because scouting ships investigating activity on the horizon finally entered visual contact. This demonstrates the difference between intelligence and detection. Intelligence could warn an admiral that the enemy was at sea. It might suggest a general area. It could not place every hostile ship on a tactical screen. Human eyes still had to find the smoke and masts. In daylight, Officers used binoculars, telescopes, and large optical rangefinders to identify and track targets. Rangefinders estimated distance by comparing slightly different views of the same ship. In theory, a trained crew could measure the range and provide accurate information to the gunnery system. In practice, the observer was trying to align images of a moving target while standing on a moving ship over a moving sea. Smoke obscured the hull. Shell splashes blocked the view. Vibration affected the instrument. The target changed course. Visibility shifted. Several ships fired at once, making it difficult to determine which splashes belonged to which guns. At night, optical rangefinding became far less reliable. A rangefinder needed a visible object with recognizable edges. A dark silhouette provided little detail. Searchlights or fire could reveal the target, but they also created glare, smoke, and shadows. Distance became deceptive. A small destroyer nearby could resemble a larger cruiser farther away. Once a vessel was seen, identification became the next crisis. Navies trained officers and lookouts to recognize ship classes by silhouette. The number and position of funnels mattered. So did mast arrangement, turret layout, bow shape, and the spacing between major structures. Recognition books contained drawings and photographs of friendly and enemy vessels from different angles. Sailors studied them because the decision might have to be made quickly. In daylight, a trained observer could sometimes distinguish a German battleship from a British one at considerable distance. At night, most of the useful details vanished. The observer might see only 2 funnels, a mast, and a dark hull. Friendly fire became a constant danger. A ship separated from its formation could reappear in an unexpected direction. Destroyers moved ahead, behind, and along the flanks of the battle line. Cruisers shifted position. Damaged ships slowed or changed course. Smoke and darkness erased the fleet's orderly arrangement. Then a silhouette appeared where no friendly ship was expected. Was it an enemy preparing a torpedo attack, or a friendly destroyer that had lost its station? A captain might have seconds to decide. Fire too early, and he could kill his own sailors. Wait too long, and enemy torpedoes might already be in the water. Recognition signals attempted to reduce this danger. Ships could flash coded lights, show certain combinations of lamps, or exchange challenge and reply signals. The codes changed so the enemy could not easily imitate them. But the system was fragile. The correct signalman had to notice the challenge. The response had to be transmitted quickly. The equipment had to work. And the captain might hesitate to display any light because light revealed his ship's position. That was the central contradiction of night fighting. To identify another vessel, a ship needed light. To survive, it wanted darkness. Electric searchlights offered one solution. By World War I, major warships carried powerful lamps mounted high on the superstructure. Their beams could illuminate targets, assist navigation, transmit signals, and expose torpedo craft approaching at night. A searchlight transformed the sea. One moment there was nothing. The next, a brilliant white beam cut through this darkness, and a ship appeared inside it. Funnels, masts, guns, and waves became visible. Gunners could aim. Lookouts could identify the target. Other vessels could fire at the illuminated silhouette. But turning on a searchlight was an act of extraordinary risk. The beam did not only reveal the enemy, it pointed directly back toward the ship using it. Enemy gunners could fire toward the source. Several hostile ships might concentrate on the illuminated vessel. The glare damaged the night vision of friendly crews. Smoke reflected light back toward the ship, creating a glowing wall. Mist scattered the beam. If several searchlights operated at once, they could create more confusion than clarity. Navies developed procedures to control them. One vessel might illuminate while others fired. Searchlights could be trained in a likely direction before being switched on. Shutters allowed the beam to appear suddenly. The ideal was simple. Surprise the enemy, illuminate him, fire immediately, and extinguish the lamp before he could respond. But ideal procedures rarely survived contact. The beam might find the wrong ship. Smoke could hide the target. Shellfire might destroy the light. The enemy could activate searchlights of his own. And once the guns opened fire, darkness broke into violent flashes. Heavy naval guns produced enormous flames. A battleship hidden in darkness could betray its location the moment it fired. Observers watched the horizon for gun flashes. A flash gave direction, but not necessarily accurate range. By the time opposing guns turned toward it, the firing ship might have changed course. Gun flashes also became confused with explosions, lightning, searchlights, and burning vessels. Every flash was evidence. None provided the complete picture. Illuminating shells, often called star shells, offered another method. A gun fired a shell designed to release a bright flare suspended beneath a parachute. The light descended slowly and illuminated a wide area. An enemy ship could be silhouetted beneath or beyond it, while the firing vessel remained relatively dark. But star shells were difficult to use well. They had to burst at the correct range, height, and direction. A flare behind the enemy could outline him clearly. A flare in front might blind friendly observers or illuminate friendly ships. Wind carried the light away, Cloud and haze reduced its effect. The first shells might reveal that ships were nearby without placing the illumination where gunners needed it. Night illumination was a skill, and the first accurate use of it could decide an engagement before the other side understood what was happening. Smaller vessels presented the greatest danger. Destroyers and torpedo boats were fast, low in the water, and difficult to see. Their task in night action was often to approach close enough to launch torpedoes at battleships and cruisers. The torpedo turned darkness into a weapon. A destroyer did not need to defeat a battleship with gunfire. It needed to survive long enough to place several self-propelled weapons into the path of the enemy formation. The torpedoes then traveled unseen beneath the surface. A battleship lookout might detect the attacker too late. He might see a searchlight, gun flashes, or the white wake of the destroyer turning away. By then, the torpedoes were already approaching. Spotting a torpedo at night was extremely difficult. Some torpedoes left visible wakes, especially in moonlight or phosphorescent water. Lookouts watched for pale lines or disturbances moving toward the ship. But warning time was short. A large battleship could not instantly turn or stop. The officer on the bridge might order a turn toward or away from the tracks, hoping to reduce the target's width or pass between them. The decision was based on seconds of uncertain observation. Sometimes the supposed wake was only a wave. Sometimes the real torpedo was never seen. Destroyer screens were therefore essential. Friendly destroyers formed protective barriers around the battle fleet. They searched for enemy torpedo craft, launched attacks of their own, and warned the heavier ships. But darkness turned the screen into another source of confusion. Friendly and enemy destroyers crossed paths. Both sides maneuvered rapidly. Searchlights appeared. Guns fired at close range. Ships lost contact with their flotillas. Some followed the wrong vessel. Others found themselves inside the enemy formation without immediately realizing it. The fighting became less like a controlled fleet battle and more like a series of sudden ambushes. That was what happened after sunset at Jutland. During the afternoon and evening of May 31st, the British Grand Fleet and the German High Seas Fleet had fought through smoke, haze, destroyer attacks, and changing visibility. Admiral Sir John Jellicoe commanded the British fleet. Admiral Reinhard Scheer commanded the German force. Jellicoe eventually placed the Grand Fleet between Scheer and the German bases. The British possessed the stronger battle fleet. In daylight, Jellicoe hoped to use superior numbers and coordinated heavy gunfire to destroy the German force. But darkness was approaching. And once darkness arrived, the battlefield that seemed clear on a chart began to dissolve. Jellicoe knew the Germans were attempting to escape. He did not know the exact position and course of every German formation. The fleets had maneuvered repeatedly. Smoke concealed ships. Reports arrived late. Different British squadrons possessed different fragments of information. Some vessels could see enemy ships that the commander-in-chief could not. Wireless messages existed, but they did not create a shared, real-time picture. Jellicoe arranged the Grand Fleet for the night and placed destroyers behind the battleships, where they could attack German vessels trying to pass southward. He also tried to reduce the danger of British battleships, mistaking their own destroyers for enemy torpedo craft. That concern alone reveals the reality of the battle. The commander of the world's most powerful fleet had to prepare not only to fight the enemy, but to prevent his own ships from attacking one another. Scheer needed to break through the British forces and reach German waters. The High Seas Fleet continued south through the darkness. What followed was not one coherent engagement. It was a sequence of confused encounters between destroyers, cruisers, battleships, and isolated formations. Ships appeared suddenly at close range. Searchlights flashed on. Guns opened fire. Torpedoes were launched. Then the darkness closed again. Some British destroyers encountered sections of the German battle fleet without fully understanding what they had found. Some attacked. Others lost contact or hesitated. Individual captains saw opportunities that Jellicoe's headquarters did not know existed. Reports about German movement did not always reach him in time or in a form that allowed him to turn the entire Grand Fleet toward the enemy. The High Seas Fleet passed behind the British battle line and escaped toward Germany. From a modern perspective, this can seem almost impossible. Dozens of enormous ships were nearby. Wireless existed. Searchlights existed. British destroyers were making contact. How could the fleet commander not know exactly where the enemy was? Because knowing that several German ships had been seen was not the same as knowing the position, course, and formation of the entire High Seas Fleet. A destroyer report might describe a few battleships. The location might be uncertain. The message might be delayed. The reporting destroyer might itself be lost. The enemy could alter course immediately afterward. And headquarters had to distinguish reliable information from rumor in the middle of a night battle. Turning a line of battleships toward uncertain contact was also dangerous. The vessels were operating in formation, with limited visibility. A mistaken maneuver could cause collision. The fleet might turn directly into torpedo attacks. British ships might fire on friendly destroyers. A close-range night engagement would reduce the advantage of superior numbers and increase the importance of chance. Jellicoe later described night action between heavy ships as largely a matter of chance, fought at close range and often decided within the first few minutes. That was an assessment of what darkness did to command. The Grand Fleet had been designed to destroy the German fleet through coordinated heavy gunfire. Night broke coordination into isolated encounters. It made torpedoes disproportionately dangerous. It made identification uncertain. It placed a battleship at risk from a small destroyer that might become visible only after reaching effective range. The German Navy had trained seriously for night operations and possessed effective searchlights, torpedo armament, and procedures for moving in darkness. British officers understood that a confused, close-range action could allow the weaker force to inflict losses far beyond what it might achieve in daylight. The night fighting at Jutland produced a series of violent episodes. The German armored cruiser Frauenlob encountered British light cruisers and was struck by a torpedo from HMS Southampton. She capsized and sank with most of her crew. The German pre-dreadnought battleship Pommern was hit by a torpedo from the British destroyer HMS Onslaught and exploded. British destroyers were also destroyed. HMS Tipperary was illuminated by German searchlights and subjected to devastating gunfire. She burned in the darkness, becoming both a wreck and a visible landmark for ships passing nearby. HMS Ardent, HMS Fortune, and HMS Turbulent were lost during the confused encounters. One of the most dramatic incidents involved the British armored cruiser HMS Black Prince. Black Prince had become separated from the main British fleet. During the night, she approached a line of ships. Their identity was unclear. They were German battleships. At extremely close range, German searchlights illuminated the cruiser, and heavy guns opened fire. Black Prince was overwhelmed and exploded with the loss of her entire crew. The destruction was rapid because darkness had compressed the engagement. There was no long approach under observation, no gradual exchange beginning at great distance. One moment, the cruiser was searching through darkness. The next, she was exposed inside the concentrated fire of the enemy battle line. This was night naval combat before radar. Contact and destruction could be almost the same event. Burning ships created another form of visibility. Fire illuminated hulls, smoke, wreckage, and nearby water. A damaged ship could reveal the position of vessels around it. The flames helped rescuers locate survivors, but they also attracted enemy fire. A captain near a burning vessel faced a difficult choice: remain close and risk becoming visible, or turn away and abandon men in the water. Fire also distorted perception. A burning ship might be mistaken for another class. Its brightness could conceal vessels beyond it. Smoke drifted across the sea. The wreck became both a beacon and a screen. Sailors in the water watched silhouettes pass without knowing whether they were friendly or enemy. Rescue itself was dangerous. A ship that stopped became vulnerable to submarines and torpedoes. Sound provided clues, but it was unreliable. Crews heard propellers, engines, gunfire, impacts, and explosions. Early hydrophones could detect underwater machinery and propeller noise under favorable conditions, especially during anti-submarine patrols, but they did not create a clean visual display. The operator listened through headphones and attempted to determine direction and character. The ship's own machinery produced noise. Water flowing past the hull interfered. Other vessels created additional sounds. A contact could be heard without being accurately located. Against a submarine, even a rough indication was useful. Against a fast-moving surface formation, sound alone could not solve the problem. Navies also used geography to make the enemy easier to find. The ocean was enormous, but ships could not move everywhere with equal freedom. Naval bases had approaches. Straits forced traffic into narrower channels. Minefields restricted safe routes, coastlines, and shallow water-shaped movement. A fleet returning to Germany from the North Sea was likely to pass through certain approaches near Horn's Reef and the Heligoland Bight. If commanders could not search the entire sea, they could place forces where the enemy would eventually need to pass. This was detection through prediction. Blockades worked according to a similar principle. The British did not need to station battleships directly outside every German harbor at all times. A distant blockade, supported by patrols, minefields, intelligence, cruisers, and control of the northern exits from the North Sea, restricted German movement. German ships and submarines still escaped, but they did so through routes shaped by geography and British pressure. Night offered opportunities to pass through patrol lines. Ships darkened their lights. They used bad weather. They altered courses. Some surface raiders disguised themselves as merchant vessels, hiding weapons and attempting to resemble neutral ships until they were close enough to attack. Disguise made visual identification even harder. At night, a false silhouette could delay action for the few minutes needed to escape or fire first. Submarines benefited especially from darkness. World War I, submarines spent significant time on the surface, where diesel engines allowed greater speed and recharged their batteries. At night, a surfaced submarine presented a low silhouette and could maneuver more effectively than when submerged. Lookouts on merchant ships and escorts searched for wakes, conning towers, and unusual movement. Moonlight might reveal the submarine. Darkness might make it almost invisible. Destroyers and patrol vessels searched using lookouts, intelligence, hydrophones, patrol routes, and searchlights. They did not sweep the ocean with radar. They moved through areas where submarines were expected and watched for a sign: a periscope, an oil patch, a wake, a suspicious wireless signal, a torpedo track, a merchant ship suddenly exploding. Detection often came only after the attack had begun. Convoys reduced the problem by concentrating merchant vessels under escort. Instead of trying to protect every ship scattered across the ocean, escorts guarded groups traveling together. But convoy operations created their own nighttime dangers. Merchant ships had to maintain formation with limited lighting. Too much light revealed the convoy. Too little made collision more likely. Ships differed in speed and handling. Fog and smoke concealed neighboring vessels. A convoy could extend across miles of sea, with escorts patrolling around its edges while submarines searched for openings. The measures that concealed the convoy from the enemy also made the convoy dangerous to itself. The same was true of battle fleets. Before radar, formation discipline was one of the main defenses against confusion. Each ship had an assigned position relative to the flagship or neighboring vessel. Officers knew the planned course and speed. They watched dim stern lights, silhouettes, and wakes to maintain station. If every ship followed the plan, the fleet could move through darkness as one body. But one mistake could spread quickly. A vessel slowed because of machinery trouble. The ship behind closed the distance. Another altered course to avoid collision. The formation began to bend. Messages had to be transmitted without revealing the fleet. A sudden, unexpected maneuver could place ships dangerously close together. Large warships required considerable distance to stop or turn. A captain might see another hull emerge from darkness only seconds before impact. Admirals, therefore, issued detailed night orders before sunset. Formations were reorganized. Courses, speeds, destroyer stations, recognition signals, and emergency procedures were distributed while visual signaling remained easier. The fleet attempted to decide as much as possible in advance. Captains needed to understand the larger intention. Should they attack any enemy encountered? Should destroyers launch torpedoes independently? Should battleships avoid close night action? Where would separated ships gather at dawn? What course would the fleet follow if communications failed? The less a captain understood the larger plan, the more dangerous isolation became. But excessive rigidity also created danger. A captain who followed instructions mechanically might ignore an unexpected opportunity or continue toward destruction. Night fighting rewarded initiative. It also punished misunderstanding. Training therefore mattered enormously. Crews practiced extinguishing unnecessary lights. Searchlight operators learned controlled sweep patterns. Gunners trained to engage targets that appeared suddenly. Lookouts studied silhouettes. Signalmen memorized recognition codes. Torpedo crews rehearsed rapid attacks. Engine rooms prepared for sudden changes of speed. Damage control teams stood ready because a close-range shell or torpedo could produce catastrophic flooding within minutes. Training reduced delay. It could not remove uncertainty. Sometimes, a captain opened fire based on only a few clues. A challenge signal received no reply. The funnel arrangement looked wrong. The silhouette approached from a EI direction where no friendly ship should be. The unknown vessel turned its guns. The decision might be made in seconds. That is what radar later transformed. Radar transmitted radio waves and measured their reflections from objects. A ship no longer needed visible light to detect another vessel. Darkness, fog, and haze became less effective forms of concealment. An operator could determine bearing and estimate range before lookouts saw the target. Contacts could be tracked over time. Fire control radar eventually allowed guns to engage vessels that optical directors could barely see. But practical naval radar belonged primarily to the next war. During the 1930s, several nations developed increasingly effective systems for detecting aircraft and ships. By World War II, radar-equipped vessels demonstrated how decisive electronic detection could be during night actions. A radar-equipped ship could know that something was approaching before a silhouette appeared. Its guns and torpedoes could be prepared. It could maneuver for advantage while remaining visually hidden. It could estimate range more reliably than a lookout staring into darkness. Radar separated detection from visibility. That was the revolution. Before radar, an enemy had to reveal some physical sign. Smoke, light, flame, a silhouette, a wake, a sound, a wireless transmission. After radar, the ship itself produced a return simply by existing within range. Darkness no longer concealed both sides equally. This changed the psychology of naval warfare. A World War I destroyer approaching an enemy battle line at night could hope to remain unseen until it reached torpedo range. A radar-equipped opponent might already be tracking it. The attacker could believe it was hidden while appearing clearly as a moving contact on a screen. Night changed from a shared concealment into an advantage for the Navy with superior sensors and training. But radar did not make the older methods irrelevant. Modern warships still post visual lookouts. They still identify contacts. They still control the electronic emissions. They still study likely enemy routes. They still understand that a sensor return is not absolute truth. Radar can be jammed. Signals can be imitated. Small vessels can blend into clutter. Equipment can fail. Electronic deception can create false impressions. And a ship using radar may reveal its own presence to an enemy capable of detecting those emissions. The ancient contradiction remains. To find the enemy, you may have to expose yourself. World War I navies experienced that contradiction in its most physical form. Moonlight helped a lookout see, but it also revealed his ship. A searchlight exposed the target, but pointed back toward its source. A gun flash marked the enemy, but also marked the gun. A wireless report informed the fleet, but could be intercepted. A burning vessel illuminated the sea, but exposed every ship nearby. Every method of seeing created a new way of being seen. That is why night actions were so different from daylight battles. In daylight, distance created time. A vessel sighted at 15 miles could be studied, tracked, and approached. At night, first sight might occur at only a few thousand yards. Two ships moving toward each other at high speed could close that distance within minutes. There might be almost no time between uncertainty and violence. Searchlights came on. Guns fired. Torpedoes entered the water. Captains ordered violent turns. Then the ships disappeared again. The crews might never learn exactly what they had fought. Reports written afterward attempted to reconstruct the encounter from times, bearings, damage, torpedo claims, and the testimony of exhausted observers. Several ships might claim attacks on the same target. A vessel believed sunk might have escaped. An explosion attributed to a torpedo could have come from a magazine fire. The clean battle map was created afterward. The men inside the action never saw it. At Jutland, the tracks of British and German ships can now be drawn as clear lines. Destroyer flotillas cross the German route. Battleships move south. Cruisers become separated. Torpedo attacks appear as arrows. From above, it looks understandable, but the captain, standing on a dark bridge, saw no lines. He saw black water, distant flashes, fragments of wireless information, and the possibility that any approaching silhouette belonged to his own navy. So how did navies find the enemy at night before radar? They began with intelligence. They intercepted messages, watched naval bases, monitored patterns of activity, questioned merchant crews, and studied the routes hostile forces were likely to use. Then they searched with ships. Cruisers and destroyers spread across the sea, extending the battle fleet's vision. Lookouts watched for smoke, sparks, silhouettes, wakes, and changes in the horizon. Once contact came, signalmen reported it. Searchlights and illuminating shells exposed targets. Gun flashes revealed firing vessels. Destroyers approached through darkness to launch torpedoes. Recognition signals attempted to separate friend from enemy. And underneath all of it was human judgment. One lookout decided what he saw. One wireless operator decided whether he copied a message correctly. One captain decided whether a shadow was hostile. One destroyer commander decided whether the line of dark shapes ahead belonged to the enemy fleet or his own. Sometimes they were right. Sometimes they were wrong. And sometimes the answer arrived only when the first shell struck. The warship before radar carried some of the most advanced machinery humanity had ever built. Steam turbines, electric generators, gyroscopic compasses, wireless telegraphy, optical rangefinders, mechanical fire control systems, heavy guns capable of firing shells, beyond the visible horizon. And yet its first defense against darkness was still a sailor standing outside in the cold, staring into the night with his eyes. That sailor was part of the ship's sensor system. His vision, training, memory, exhaustion, and fear all entered the calculation. A modern radar display might show a clean point of light. He saw something far less certain, a darker darkness, a shape where no shape had been before, a brief strip of foam, a spark beneath the horizon. From that fragment, an entire ship had to decide whether to turn, signal, illuminate, fire, or remain silent. That was naval warfare before radar. The enemy was not a contact on a screen. He was a possibility hidden inside the night. And sometimes, the only warning that the possibility had become real was the sudden opening of a searchlight, the white track of a torpedo, and the flash of guns already aimed directly at you. If this story changed the way you imagine warfare before modern technology, subscribe to Before Modern War. We examine how soldiers and sailors communicated, navigated, survived, and fought before electronic systems transformed the battlefield.